Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Industry Connect podcast by Seekamentor. My name is Aditi Gupta, and I am a product manager based in London. And today we have a very talented product manager with us, Kashish Duhan. She has a very diverse experience in product management domain. Welcome, Kashish.
Thank you, Aditi. Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining this podcast. And we are really excited to know a little bit about you and your experience. So, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure, I can get started with my introduction. My name is Kashish, as Aditi already told. I work as a product manager with Booking.com, based out of Amsterdam, Netherlands. A little bit about my background. Like most other Indians, I am also an engineer. I started my, I did my degree in computer science engineering, but while I was doing it, I realized that I don't want to go on the purely technical side and want to explore something else. That's when I got into Mu Sigma and started working as a data analyst or a decision scientist, as they call it. And my journey from there has been very exciting and very eventful, I would say. From a decision scientist, I transitioned into a product management manager within India, and then I moved across to Europe. So yeah, that's quite interesting. But if I have to talk about the company specifically, I was working with Mu Sigma, then I moved to Walmart. That is where I started my journey as a product manager. And then finally moved to Misho, where I was working as a senior product manager. I had a brief stint with Nika as well, and then I moved to Booking.com. So quite a lot of companies, but yeah, uh, interesting work has been done.
Yeah, that's a very impressive profile, I must say.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to know like what motivated you to move from decision making or like data science profile to product management?
So the when I was into data science or data analytics, right? I eventually moved into product analyst as a domain. So when I joined Walmart, I moved from pure decision sciences, which is in a services company, to a more of a product analyst role, which was within Walmart, and that is when I realized the world of product management, which was so huge, which works so closely with business, which works so closely with other domains, and is making a lot of impact. So while I was there, the motivation for me to move into product management was majorly around getting visibility into business decisions. When I was working as a product analyst, you work on certain stuff, you get a lot of requests, you're very closer to the data, you make sense out of data, insights, and everything. But one thing that was missing is how do I get direct visibility into the business decisions that are happening at a higher level, right? So as a product manager, you get much more visibility into that. So that was one of the biggest motivation factor. And the other one was having a direct accountability for the projects that I was taking up, right? So again, as an analyst, I was working on certain things. There were asks, there were analysis, there were experiments, but there was not direct accountability. So as people say, that product managers are the mini CEOs of their own products, right? So that really excited me a lot. And I still believe in it because I really feel that you have to own the product completely end to end, from the discovery to the execution. And that keeps me going on and on.
Yeah, interesting. So what was your experience getting into product management? Like, was that difficult for you, or like how did you navigate the transition?
Yeah. So getting an opportunity, I believe, is the most difficult part, which a lot of people have asked me around, right? How do I move into product management? How do I get that opportunity? On that front, I was a little lucky because for me, the transition happened because my senior director felt I can be a good product manager and she reached out to me, right? So it was not like I had to go and convince somebody that, hey, I want to be a product manager. It was more like a pull for me. But
Hmm.
the journey that followed ahead was the most interesting one because it was not a one-day process where somebody told you that, hey, I think you'll be a good product manager and you become a product manager. The journey started from that day to figuring it out. Do I really like it? Right. So I started shadowing a lot of PMs within the team, started going into those meetings, started understanding what their day-to-day looks like. I read a lot of books. There are quite a lot of interesting books which I can recommend to a few upcoming product managers, right? Then I started looking at a lot of interviews that people are doing out there. Although I was going within the same company as a PM, but I really wanted to ensure that if I am going there, I don't want to come back to another domain again, right? So the
Right.
journey followed as to looking into product managers, shadowing them, listening to a lot of podcasts, looking at a lot of interviews. I was given some smaller projects to just see how I'm thinking, if that first principle thinking or the design thinking is actually there or not. And
Mm.
I believe it was like a 6 to 8 months process when eventually it was decided that yes, I should become an APM or a PM in this specific team.
Understood. Makes sense. So the next question that follows kind of this existing discussion is like, you did shadow other product managers, but were there, for people who do not have the luxury to shadow other product managers or senior product managers or don't have a mentor,
Mm.
what can they do themselves? Like, can they follow some resources, some communities, or how do they build these skills if they want to enter product management? People who are pretty new.
Yeah, I would say just follow the three things, right? One, read a few books around product management, see if this really interests you. A lot of times people reach out to me saying, I want to be a product manager, but when I try asking them questions, the answer is not very clear, right? Why do you want to become a product manager? What excites you about product management? So maybe read a lot of books about it. Talk to as many PMs as possible around you, outside your company, in startups, in well-known organizations, just to understand how the day-to-day looks like. Because the life of a PM in a certain company is completely different from a PM in another company, right? And once you enter into product management, you can't say that I don't want to do this versus I want to do this, because
Mm.
even you would agree that as a PM, your day to day changes the moment you change a company, right? Even if you change a team. So I just tell people, talk to as many PMs as possible. Just ask them, what do you do in a day, right? From the sprint planning to the scrums to just everything that they're doing, vision and strategy. And the last one is just read online or try to do some courses uh, around product management. So
Mm.
understand the key skills that are needed. If you feel you don't have those skills, you can try to work on those skills specifically. Because even if there is one skill that you feel, hey, I don't think I am interested in this one, and that's a key skill for a product manager, you will
Mm.
ultimately lack. So I will never recommend that you take a leap of faith and say, I'll move into product management and see how can I improve. So
Mm.
homework is always important. So I say these three steps, right? Read books, talk to PMs, and then just listen to podcasts or read about things.
Understood. Makes sense. So you talk about skills. That raises a question like, what do you think are the most important skills that recruiters are looking into product folks, both
Yeah.
in India and outside India, considering that you were able to make a move from India to Netherlands? So
Yeah,
what do you think
I
is the most important skill?
yeah, the most important skills, in my opinion, is the biggest and the most important one is the strategic thinking, which people tend to take a little casually. But I just feel, uh, are you able to think about the vision and the strategy of the product, right? Can you convince yourself that the product that you're working on or the plan that you're making is achievable, is going to benefit the company, is aligned with the company's objectives? That's the biggest and the most important thing for me. So I always tell people that this doesn't come naturally to you. You build it over time. You think about a few products, you think about a few cases, and then you build this strategy and the vision, right? Uh,
Mm.
the second one I feel is more on the prioritization and management, because as a PM in a day-to-day activity, and I think most PMs will agree with me, you need to prioritize things, right? Your product can move in 10 different directions. What is the right direction for my product to be in? And how do I manage the stakeholders that I have? Because you will have ultimately design team working on it, other PMs working on it, you will have tech, you will have data science, you will have business, so many teams you have to deal with, right? And you need to prioritize your conversations, you need to prioritize your tickets, you need to prioritize what will be taken up when, right? And all of this again should dive into the strategic thinking part as to how do you move in the right direction to achieve the business objectives, right? So that also becomes very important. And the third last but not the least is the communication skill, because as a PM, my team cracks this joke, right? So they just tell me, if you're not in a meeting, what do you do? So PMs do attend a lot of meetings. You talk to a lot of people, you talk to stakeholders and try to understand how your product can help their needs, and vice versa, right? So communication skill, I feel, is very important for a product manager. It's not the most important one. Yes, you can build it over time. It's not something that you have to have as a mandatory thing, but I just feel it makes your life much more easier if you try to build that skill a little better.
Yep, yep. So, in a nutshell, strategic thinking, prioritization, and communication skills are the top three skills that you think recruiters are looking for.
Yeah, I mean, these are the three basic ones. But then again, when you try to apply for companies, right? It depends on the role that you're being hired for. At a very higher level, things are a little different, right? They want you to focus more on strategic thinking, visioning. They want you to be expert in this. At a junior level, people want you to be experts in, hey, prioritization. Can you manage the expectation? Can you do the execution very well, right? So you can build on the skills. So I always say, see what you are looking for, see your role, see what you want to expect, and then ultimately decide what are the three main ones for you at that moment.
Understood. Makes sense. Um, so I can see that, in your experience, you've moved from India to Netherlands, which is not very easy to do, especially in the existing market, in the current market, which is very tough. So I wanted to understand, like, how did you land a job at booking.com from India? And did you notice any difference in the hiring process between what happens in India and abroad?
Got it. Yeah. So, I mean, to the point of how did you land up a job, it is definitely through referrals. I really feel the market outside India believes a lot in referrals, getting a lot of people that their people from their company have suggested, right? So for anybody who is trying to look for a job outside, I would say to reach out to people, try to get in through a referral, because the prioritization order when a recruiter sees your resume is referrals first, right? First is definitely internal hiring, then it comes down to referrals, and the third one is people who have applied online, right? So I just tell people, reach out to referrals, try to do it that way. And when it comes to the hiring process, one thing I always tell people is that within India also the hiring process differs a lot, right? That when you're going for a startup, things are very different when you go for a well-known organizations or organizations that have been there for a while. The process is almost set, right? So it's very different. Here in, I mean, outside India, to whichever companies that I have interviewed with, everybody had a very different um, interview process, right? Some would focus on craft interviews, which is pure on the product management skills. Some would focus a lot on your past projects, right? Some would focus a lot on the technical knowledge that you have about the projects. So it's just depends on the role that you are being interviewed for. I always tell people, just read the JD maybe 3 or 4 times to be able to understand whether you are a strong match for this or not, and then try to reach out to people. What I have seen people doing is they keep on applying, 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 and then there is a saturation about your resume in the database, right? And you can't apply it again. So I just feel always do it after seeing a very strong skill set match, so that
Mm.
you can take all the shots that are needed and when required, right? So, yeah, at booking, I mean, if I have to tell you about the process at booking, booking is usually a 4 or 5 step process where they focus a lot on the craft interviews. So, everybody goes through 2 craft interviews at least, which
Okay.
are majorly around product management skills, right?
Mm.
So, one of the craft interviews, the teams will focus more on strategic thinking, vision, right? Technical knowledge, all those kind of things. And in the other craft interview, they would test your skills on uh, mm, subjective decision making, right? There'll be situations that are put up to you, and I expect you to tell them how did you manage it, right? To
Mm,
give an example, there was a conflict in your team. As a product manager, how did you resolve it? Now, there's no right and wrong answer to it. You can always tell what you have felt, but you need to be prepared with those things. You need to understand uh, how to portray those things, right? So
mm,
those are the things that usually happen at booking. In other interviews, you focus a lot on the technical aspects, right? If you're a technical product manager, they will deep dive into that, or a
mm,
specific project that you've worked on. So in that project, how deep did you go with the tech team versus the data scientist team versus the design team, right? And how those decisions were made. So
mm.
they focus a lot on that as well.
Understood. So your prior experience, whatever projects you have worked on, you should be able to, explain very clearly what you did, how you managed. So
Yeah.
have your stories prepared well in advance is what you're saying.
Yes.
Makes
Homework is
sense.
always needed.
Yeah, absolutely. So so now that we're talking about, moving from India to abroad, a lot of people make that decision, and uh, mostly people talk about the positive aspects of it. But is there any other aspect that is not talked about that much, but it should be considered when somebody's considering a career move to another country?
Yeah, I mean, yes, there are a lot of positives, but the only thing I ask people, and I tend to tell them to ask themselves is, why do you want to do it, right? What motivates you to move out of the country? Uh, it sounds very lucrative. It sounds very good, right? When you say, "Hey, I moved across countries and I did this," but I tell people just sit down in a room and talk to yourself. Don't tell anybody else. Why do you want to do it? Do you want to do it for a different lifestyle? Do you want to do it for money? Do you want to do it for different companies? Because most of these opportunities are available out there in India as well, right? So you need to have like a very strong reason to say why do you want to do such a paradigm shift. And like just be honest to yourself and then decide what you want to do, right? So the examples I said, do you want to do it for lifestyle, for money, or for good companies? That will help you shortlist the places that you can go to and help you think of where should I apply, right? So that while you're making such a big move, which is you're basically shifting or uprooting yourself from one country and settling in into another, you don't want things to not be in your direction, right? So
Right,
imagine you say, I want to move out of India for money, but then you end up in a company which doesn't pay well because the cost of living in a country is quite high.
right,
Then you have almost shifted your base and you're not happy with what you really wanted to achieve. And
right.
but now you're in a new country, you can't do anything. And that is what I feel people struggle a lot with. Just be true to yourself and tell yourself what you want, and basis that make that decision.
Right. Makes sense. And also, I think it's not always that hunky-dory once you move abroad. There are a lot of challenges as well. Especially there are cultural differences. Fitting in a team could be a challenge. So I think all of those things would also uh, make sense. One should consider them as well. Awesome. So just one last question, which I think is the most important one, in my opinion. Before anybody decides to move into product or decides to move abroad, what do you think is the most challenging aspect of a product manager's job?
Um, Product management is tough, but okay, the most challenging aspect in that, I would say, is adaptability. As I earlier also quoted, when a product manager moves across projects or moves across companies, it is a net new blank notebook for them, right? Because you have to understand the entire process that the company follows, the entire tech that the company follows, the entire organizational behavior, right? Their objectives, how are they set? What do you do? So I just feel adaptability, in my opinion, becomes very important and a most challenging factor because
Mm,
market is changing, tech is changing, customer preferences are changing, right? Pre-COVID, post-COVID, customer preferences are also different. So
mm.
you can't say that I have done product management for 6 years, so I know what needs to be done in the company till you actually join a company, right?
Right.
So I just feel you need to be adaptable and you need to pivot quickly in response to what you are seeing, what you're feeling about the project, and how you are dealing with the long-term strategic objectives.
Understood. So, I mean, when you move to a new company, it can become a little overwhelming, given you just said, right, it's a blank notebook for you, and you have to understand the new company, navigate through, uh, the product, what are the problem statements, etc. So, is there any advice that you have for someone who has joined a company recently? What should they do to better, adjust in the new company and understand their problem statements?
Yeah, I mean, just read and talk to people is what I usually do. I feel you can read a lot about all the documentation that exists, start at a company level, then go to a track group level, then come to a team level, right? Try to understand what the company is trying to do, what the BU is trying to do, what your team is trying to do. And while you are doing this, because I always feel talking leaves a hard, like a stronger impression in my brain than reading. So I retain much more information when I talk. Just keep on talking to people because you need to build those connects. You need to understand what everybody else is doing. So keep on talking, keep on asking questions. Again, as a product manager, you cannot feel any question is stupid because if you don't ask it, the answer is always no, right? So you need to keep on asking. You need to ensure that you have asked a question at least 4 times to be able to say that you have retained that information. And I always feel when I am on the receiving end, which is when people ask me questions, I build much more confidence about my product because they bring a different dimension to it, right? So as a new PM, I just tell people take your time, read, ask, and keep on doing it till you actually feel you've reached a point where you are in a meeting and something is being discussed and you understand it, right? That is what gives you a sense of accomplishment that yes, now I know what this product is about. Let's start thinking about the strategy, right? So that's what I usually follow and I tell people to follow.
Understood. Yep, that makes sense. Asking question is the uh, only way through which you can find information which you don't know. So absolutely makes sense. Um, that brings us to the end of the podcast. Uh, it was really an amazing session. I at least I learned a lot. I'm sure the listeners will also take a lot from this session. So thank you so much for your time, Kashish.
Thank you
It was a pleasure
for
talking
having
to
me here. It was a super interesting conversation. Thank you, Aditi, for hosting this. And I hope we both have added some value to the people who are listening to it. But yeah, super exciting conversation. Thank you.
you. Yeah, thank you so much. Have a good day.
You too.